Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Building Pathways to Healthy Minds podcast. I am your host, Priscilla Bagley, and I sat down today with Rachel Frazier, who is a counselor, and we dove into the subject of conquering our anxiety and ADD by organizing our thoughts and creating plans, how we can come alongside our children when they're having learning differences or difficulties, and strategies and resources for building confidence in our kids. She had some great insight into those topics, some strategies, and some books that she uses to help children with all kinds of things. I hope you enjoy this. Let's get started.
I am so excited today. I get to chat with an old friend who has done a lot of work with child builders over the years. Rachel Frazier is here. She's a licensed professional counselor and just a great resource. She's always been so wonderful to chat with and talk through because she used to work in which school district was it again, Rachel?
Well, so when you and I worked together, I worked in Sheldon ISD.
Heldon, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. And then I retired a year ago from Deer Park ISD.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I remember because I didn't know much about Sheldon ISD. It's a smaller district.
Yes.
And so we would meet and we would talk about curriculum, and you were part of our advisory board and just a champion for Stand Strong, Stay Safe, for sure. You
Yes.
did that for many years.
Loved it. Yeah, that's a wonderful curriculum.
So tell us a little bit since then what you have been doing.
So I retired a year ago, and I am now working in the more of the private sector at a facility called Ellie Mental Health in Kingwood, where we see all of the people. We see children, adolescents, families, adults, all ages, mood disorders, ADD, ADHD, school related issues, self esteem, relationships.
So when you and I talked a few months ago, we were kind of just reconnecting. And I mentioned, hey, if we ever did a podcast, what do you see the most in, I think, just, well, and another note is that you are a parent, you have two kids who
Yes.
are, you have walked through the stages, the baby, the toddler, and they are now both in their 20s.
Yes.
And so it just us being interested in speaking to parents, I said, what do you think as a counselor? What do you see a lot in counseling with kids?
I think some of the things that I see and we see as that we see at Ellie as a facility, we have parents call and ask, for help with anxiety. We have a lot of anxiety issues with our children, children of all ages, younger to college, elementary to college, anxiety. We have kids that would like to come in and get strategies for ADD and ADHD, and that too is all ages. We have kids that come in and would like help with just different school related issues. It might be peer issues, conflicts with peers. And I think one of the things that I see that's been the last few years, we have a lot of anxiety with our children.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Do you think
Lots and
that's
lots of anxiety.
has that gotten just even more? I think about, COVID and the last few years. Have you seen a rise in that
Definitely.
anxious? Yeah.
Definitely. I was still in the schools when COVID happened,
Mhm.
and I'm sure you remember all of that going on. And we had to teach from home
Yeah.
and do counseling from home, and that was challenging, and it was challenging for those children and parents. And so then we re-enter school, and school looks so different. And so as a school counselor back then, there was lots and lots of anxiety with parents too. Parents had a lot of anxiety about sending their children back to school.
So what are some strategies, still being, kind of the process of us still dealing with all of that, being pretty traumatic those years. What are some strategies that you use with kids um, that are dealing with a lot of anxiety?
So I teach a lot of grounding techniques with, and this is good for any ages, but especially children. I teach them grounding techniques where they can use their five senses, and it's a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I talk about, okay, you're going to use your five senses. Think of 5 things you can hear, 4 things and they can do this in any order. 5 things you can hear, 4 things you can smell, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you could taste, and 1 thing you can, what was the one see, thank you.
Yeah.
I always I forget the one I left out. And I teach, that's a good grounding technique. And and so they usually grasp that pretty quickly. And a good ground, that's a very good grounding technique with anxiety. And we talk about what are things that make you feel calm? What are some things you enjoy? Think of things that you like. Think of a calming place or a place you love. So when you're feeling anxious or you're feeling nervous, think of that place that makes you happy, that you enjoy being at, like coping skills. And we look at pictures of things. What are things that you can do? You can exercise, you can dance, I talked about visualizing a happy place. You can have quiet time. You can go play outside. We talk about squeezy balls. You can go out, you can count to 10. So all of those different kinds of coping skills we give them.
That's great, because so often when I'm having an anxious moment, like I know all those, but when you're in the moment, you can't really go through what's going on. I mean, all you're feeling is the anxiety.
We try to give them visuals, and I have them think of the things that they like to do when they're not in the moment, so that it's already in their mind of things they like to do. It doesn't have to be that visual that I give them. We create their own kinds of things they like to do.
Okay.
So that, they like to color, or they like to, some say, well, I like to take a nap. Okay. That's
I
fine.
get that.
Yeah. Whatever those things are.
It's almost like, it's almost like you're creating a vision board.
Yeah.
Do they create their own? Like, can they cut out pictures and be like, these are the things that calm me?
Sure. Yes. Yes.
You also mentioned some ADD or ADHD behaviors that kids to kind of get some strategies or help with. And so can you speak to that? What does that look like? And what are your strategies for helping with maybe learning differences?
So some of the things we work on like task list and organizational skills, and we work on organizing the night before. How can you be organized the night before so that the morning of going to school is not so crazy getting out the door? And this is with parents too, so that parents have a good morning getting out the door. And how can we get your morning going smoothly? So we talk about organization and the night before. Get your backpack, maybe can you make your lunch the night before and put it in the fridge? We talk about laying out our clothes so that our clothes are ready to go. And sometimes that might mean, and that also depends on who chooses the outfit. That can be,
that's a big deal in
depending
our house.
And age. Who does that? Does mommy do that? Does the child do that? Can mom lay out 2 outfits and mom's okay with either, and then the child can pick? Because that also gives the child some autonomy and independence, and mom will be okay with either outfit. And that's hard for moms to start letting go, of that kind of, I'm going to pick the outfit.
So does routine tend to help in those ADD situations? Okay.
Absolutely, 100%, because these children need structure. They thrive on structure, and it helps them to know what's coming next. And so they need structure. So visuals, like knowing, and they're very smart. These kids are smart.
Yeah.
Many times they're very smart children, and they need organization. So maybe if they have their schedule somewhere, and knowing, when we get home, this is what we're going to do every day. We're going to get a snack, do our homework. You can have playtime, and then dinner. You can watch TV for a little bit, or whatever that looks like, so that they know every day it's going to be the same routine. I
Yeah.
think that helps. So we talk about that. And then those older kids that are high school or college, it kind of looks the same, and you're helping them organize. And I've talked with them about, let's talk about, okay, what's happening? Okay, you're not getting your work turned in. Okay, why not? Well, I don't have the folders that I need. Okay, why don't you have that? So we talk about getting all of that organized so that they can get it turned in and remember to turn it in. Okay, well, you need to set timers on your iPad and things like that.
So that makes sense. Having a little bit of a schedule, knowing what to expect, those are really good tools to kind of keep us on task
Yeah.
in the moments.
Yeah, very much. And so like free flow, being free like that is great, but sometimes you just need a little bit of guidance.
Do you set alarms like, hey, you're going to work on this for 5 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break? What does that look like when you set alarms?
So for some of the younger kids, it's interesting because there have been some really cool different things that, and I've heard this with different colleagues and friends. They've done things like, I had a friend who her daughter tumbled. And so it would be, okay, let's work for 10 minutes and then you go tumble for 10 minutes.
Awesome.
So anything to get them to do their work. And if they needed a break, then you get a break. So anything to get them to do their work. And so it's like preferred versus non-preferred for those kids,
Yeah.
because it's hard sometimes to get them
Well,
to work.
that makes sense. And for me, it's not that I do find my most creative thoughts often happen when I'm maybe least expecting it. If I'm just
Mhm.
sitting at a desk and, plugging away,
Mhm.
I need breaks where I'm being creative, or maybe even just like a TV break or something. And so that's
Yeah.
helpful for me too, to be like, okay, if you get this chunk done, let's take
Yes.
a creative break. Let's go take a walk or a snack or whatever, and then
Yes.
come back to it in a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
And I
And
work
yeah,
better that way. Yeah.
absolutely. So they work well if they can work and have a break, work and have a break. So any kind of creative way, maybe that they can have a break. And so we talk about that, like, and it's an age thing too, you're not going to make a kindergartner work for 20 minutes.
Right.
It's going to be more like 5 and then take a break. And whereas a high schooler can work longer, and you talk with the high schooler, okay, how long do you think you could work? So, whereas a little one, you talk with the parents and get creative about, doing that together.
Do you find ADD and anxiety go hand in hand often?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And so I think for me too, just being more aware of like being mindful, I can sometimes tell myself, I don't know sometimes if it's anxiety or if it's me just, not able to attend in the moment, but I'll find my thoughts are very far away. They're not in this moment and what I'm doing, what I'm feeling. It's more like what's going to happen, or what's that person doing over there and what's that happening. And so grounding myself, being more mindful, it's not perfect. I still work on it all the time, but that is
Mhm.
helpful to me.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you find when kids come into your office or to see you, or even when you were a counselor in school, and they're having some of those learning differences? What are some like
Okay.
the emotional experiences that they're having with that? What's going on?
If they're older, they experience, worries about um, knowing that they're not like someone else. They're not like the
Mhm.
others. There's a
Mhm.
lot of that, and that brings on anxiety. So there again, there's that word anxiety. So a lot of that, you have to be very aware of, what's happening. And so there are those that when they have the learning differences, you have to watch and be sure that you can catch that, so that you can watch for the anxiety and watch for the different social aspects going on. The anxiety comes on, and anger. There's anger a lot, because they know they're not quite fitting in. So there's those feelings.
The older I get, I think we all have something that we're dealing
Mhm.
with. And it's more about maybe teaching kids to love the differences inside of themselves, and then teaching other kids like, hey, we all have this stuff. Let's make
Yes.
allowances for each other and really love
Yes.
all the pieces of who we are. Maybe we learn differently. Maybe we're daydreamers. Maybe it takes us a little while longer, or maybe we're not in the moments as much, but we can love that
Very
about
much.
ourselves. We can accept that.
Very much. It's kind of about teaching that, like what you said, we all have differences, we all learn differently, we behave differently, we act differently, but we can all be kind to one another, and love one another and like one another, and exist together. And we read differently, we do math differently, whatever that looks like, but we can exist together and take care of one another. And so it is, like you said, about taking care of one another. And that, of course, that comes into that social emotional piece where you and I like,
Yes.
to teach one another, we're going to be, let's be kind and help each other. And
Do you have any strategies or exercises you do with kids that are kind of like acceptance, or I know it sounds cheesy, but like the loving ourselves kind of piece? Do you talk to that a lot in kids?
so, when I was in school counseling, um, I had self-esteem groups. And
Mm,
so I always asked teachers, when I had small groups, I asked teachers and staff to refer children to me for different topics. And, that's how I would pull my groups together. And so it might be, so I had all kinds of different children in that self-esteem group, and we would do different self-esteem games, and I read different self-esteem books. But they could play games and work together on different strategies about, okay, well, what are some things you love about yourself? And it might be a very simple activity, but it might be hard for them to say, oh, I don't know. And they would have to work at it. And I didn't make them discuss it if they didn't want to share it, but they could. We always had a little folder and they could put their things away, but some would share, some would. Some would say, no, I'm going to put it in my folder and you keep it. Okay.
it's kind of like a couple weeks ago, we did a podcast about mindfulness. And one of the strategies Dr. Ann Freeman talked about was the just like me strategy, where when you're frustrated with someone or something's going on, can we look at them and say, have I ever been like that before? Have I done that before? Oh, yeah, I have. That person's just like me, right? So that's
Yeah.
kind of what these kids are doing when,
Yes.
they all sit around and they say, hey, we're all similar. We have more similarities than differences, and
Absolutely.
we can love things about ourselves.
Yeah,
That's very cool.
absolutely.
Are there any books that you just are go-tos for you with just acceptance, self-esteem, anxiety that you like to use with kids?
There is actually, if you're working in a group, and you want to do like a series of activities with kids, there is a wonderful workbook that you can pull activities from called the Self-Esteem Garden. And it's about, so you're teaching kids like to cultivate, and of course all the Julia cookbooks. Those
Yes,
are wonderful books. I love those books. You can find a book for anything if you look her up. I love all of her titles.
I love it.
So yeah, those are good books.
Well, I always ask at the end, if there's one thing you'd want to leave with parents, educators today, what would you say? I don't know, that sums up our time today in our chat.
I think one thing to leave with educators and parents is and I think educators are doing a pretty good job of this. I think as parents is to listen to what kids are telling us.
Okay.
I think that's
like that.
important.
Yeah, because we can get really caught up in the day to day and we don't take the time to really ask. And the podcast that's about to come out this next week is about radical curiosity as part of it.
Oh,
And
okay.
we talked about, let's be curious about our kids. Let's really listen and find
Yeah.
out what makes them tick.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, really listen. I think that's important.
Thank you for today. Thank you for coming on. And
Yeah, it was
I
fun.
love catching up.
Yeah, always. It's fun. I love talking with you.
Well, we will do it again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All
See
right.
you soon.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast episode today. The older I get, the more I realize that we all have some kind of differences in life. And as Rachel and I talked about, it's so important that we realize that as people, we are more the same than we are different, and that we make allowances and hold each other up in the midst of those differences. I hope you take away today from Rachel, who is a counselor, that as parents, the best thing we can be doing for our children is listening and having empathy and seeing things from their perspective, and that we are more the same than we are different, and that is a beautiful thing. This summer, for July and part of August, we're going to take a little break and start back with more episodes in August. And they are going to be really wonderful episodes, such as understanding how our kids speak, some more on ADHD, and other really, really great important topics. So I hope you keep joining us. Please leave us comments or questions that you have. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear about topics that you would like to hear more about. So just keep listening. And until next time, stand strong, stay safe. See you soon. Bye-bye.